Welcome back to the 1916 Company. I am your host, Team Mosso, and this is Watches Tonight. This evening we chat live. I share your viewerist chats right here on Watches Tonight. And of course, we interact through the medium of the internet with Kenny and Nick on the switcher tonight, and I appreciate them. I appreciate you. Welcome all. We might have to open up Google Chrome because we're having this stupid problem we've had with the live chat not running well. That's okay. That's easily resolved while I work on that. Guys, you want to check me out on Instagram. My 60-second videos now blanket the page. You can literally binge watch my Instagram, which features all of those videos plus occasional insights into the life and times of Team Mosso. If that sounds good to you, you want to check out Tim_Mosso on Instagram. Now, let's talk a little bit about Hong Kong because I will be there in late October. And in late October in Hong Kong, I'll be conducting collector conversations. You could be the star, which means that if you sound like an enthusiast, a devotee, a watch fanatic, or the kind of person you'd like to see on YouTube, reach out to podcasts at the1916company.com. Yes, podcasts at the1916company.com, and we will get you on the tube when I am out there for HK. Edward, Soma, Eddie, Rick, Slowboy, Keystar G60, Jim, Mark S. You are now streaming on my Google Chrome backend. I've got this streaming setup here on the desk so I can speak to you guys. And it's not that I need to watch my own show. I like to see you, Matthew Connor from DC, Sean Hansen, Enrique Cassiano from Brazil, and Watch Out from North Virginia. We got Scott, we got Tim Mancuso in the box, longtime and good friend of the show, and Thomas Burnett, Alexi Simola of Finland, David Hockridge, welcome from the big state of Texas. Viewers chats number 1. Rick R. and his Patek Philippe 5320G are en route to Menominee, Michigan. So Rick's in the box and now he's on your screen. That's a lot of horsepower in there, and the watch is the least of it. We got Kevin M. and his Vacheron Constantin Overseas visiting Switzerland National Park, which ironically is in Germany. David P. and his AP Royal Oak Offshore Diver visit Martha's Vineyard in New England on vacation. Jeff S., who I believe is watching right now, sports only the second Azimuth Mr. Roboto Bronzo Artist Series I have encountered. And that's a good one too. I got crypto engraving. You did better than I do. We have Aaron L. and his Rolex Explorer 2 Polar, scaling the Grand Tetons in Idaho, USA. Send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your pieces on these pixels. This is my Azimuth Mr. Roboto Bronzo Artist Series, which has got a bunch of terribly cliche crypto memes, but while that's not really me personality-wise, I actually like it because it feels so of our time in the sense that Naugahyde and Earth Tones were of the 70s. It's something that we'll look back on and laugh in the future. We have Eddie asking, Tim, when are you coming to New York City next? I should be up there in the next couple of weeks shooting at our New York location. Anthony M., first time watching from Montreal in the Great White North of Canada. And we've got Bob Dole from Monument, Colorado. Beautiful watches out there tonight. Gear and Train, AA, greetings from Pennsylvania. And Caliber YQG, Robert Wood, welcome and thank you for joining me from Austin, Texas. Okay, so watches people always regret. In any hobby where money is at stake, engineering adds complexity, and fashion sense compounds the challenge of choice, there will be regrets. My goal tonight isn't to discourage our viewers from owning or buying watches. Quite the opposite. I want to offer guidance so watch buyers can find lasting satisfaction with the choices that they make. One way to do that is to create a post-mortem watch list of the worst watch buying mistakes I've seen during my time in the industry. And so these are going to be the watches people regret most. They're not brands and models, although some will be mentioned. They tend to be purchasing types, decision parameters that lead to failure. So let's start with the pure dress watch, the epitome of elegance, but also in many cases too specialized. A lot of folks will say, I never have the occasion to wear it. When am I going to be that formal? When can I afford to wear a watch that may not be highly water resistant, luminescent in any way, which is susceptible to scratches and dents and swirls, and which quite frankly would seem out of place in casual company. Quick, when was the last time you guys bought a tuxedo to keep and own? I don't think in my life. Too often, these watches are easy to mark. They do have thin crystals, which, if you're going to shatter a crystal, will probably happen when the crystal is 1/5 of a millimeter thick. And also, thin movements have more susceptibility to damage, sometimes from routine motion of the wrist. You don't even have to go play golf or fire a gun. With a really thin watch, just about all activity can turn into damaging activity. So, what do we make of the pure dress watch? Well, first this. It's rarely your first watch or your only watch. It's how you round out a really well-balanced collection. And remember, sometimes if you are very sedentary and you don't have a super high-impact job, you might be able to just wear this watch to the office and expand its range of uses. But in general, I tell people to start off with some sort of a sports watch, generally a dive watch, and then get more specialized from there. Starting out with a dress watch is often a sign that maybe you didn't make the right choice out of the gate or you inherited the watch. I often recommend this as a collection rounder, not a collection cornerstone. Although, if you love dress watches, I'm not going to dispute the point. They can be beautiful. Now, another watch that people often regret, and in a big way, is the vacation watch purchase. So duty-free isn't always a great deal. Consider this, you could go buy a watch used, and the watch that you bought without tax might be 50% of retail on Chrono24 or a pre-owned vendor's website. You might be able to get it discounted straight out of the boutique or the authorized dealer in the States. So yeah, maybe you pay 6% tax, but you get 30% off. You come out ahead buying it locally, not going on vacation and then justify buying it in an airport or a duty-free shop. And also remember, back at home, you're more likely to be able to work a trade. And when you factor a trade into the equation, it's just like buying a car. It diminishes the total amount on which you will have to pay a sales tax. That's rarely the case at small mono-brand stores in vacation spots which might only have Rolex or only have Patek or only have IWC. And if they only have 3 or 4 brands, you're often going to wind up with the same problem. Trading that Chopard on a Breitling even might not be possible if the store doesn't already sell Breitling. So a trade can be a great way to diminish the price of a purchase, and oftentimes it's simply not viable. Not just because stores on vacation tend to offer a smaller array of watches, especially if you're in the US Virgin Islands or something like that, but also because you tend not to bring a bunch of watches with the thought that you're going to trade them on vacation. It's just not a common thing to do, and it often puts you on the radar of customs if you get randomly searched. So duty-free isn't always a great deal. And I'm also going to say this, you go into the Rolex store in the islands, they might not be interested in a trade on your Omega, whereas virtually any pre-owned retailer or large multi-brand store in the States or in Europe or in Asia will probably do that trade. I'm also going to say this. Good luck if customs catches you on the way back. Even as a US citizen coming back from the Virgin Islands, you're only supposed to bring back a maximum of $1,600 worth of goods or jewelry, gold or gems, and that's awfully tough to do when buying a luxury watch. Almost all of them cost more than that. So whether you're coming back from the islands, you're coming back from Asia, you're coming back from Europe, you might have to run the gauntlet of customs 2 times in some of those places, and if you get caught without a declared $25,000 watch, the tax-free purchase suddenly doesn't seem like a good idea. Also, the vacation mindset, it doesn't encourage sound decision making. When someone puts you on a spot, and you've got a do-or-die decision to make on a watch you may never have seen before you walked into that shop on vacation, a lot of times you haven't made a decision with all your resources. You haven't had a chance to consult your buddies. You haven't had a chance to see what else you could buy for the same money. You probably haven't had a chance to see what this thing resells for online if you decide it's not a good match. How much are you going to lose? And then there's another problem, which is a lot of people, and we see this all the time with watches originally bought in Hong Kong, they go go on vacation, they buy an expensive watch, they have some sort of verbal agreement to get the boxes and papers shipped to them, and they never do. So there you are with your Patek Philippe, and all of a sudden it's worth potentially 15 to 20% less because you just didn't pick up the box and papers. Maybe you were afraid it would tip off customs if you got searched. Maybe it wouldn't fit in your luggage. Maybe you were just too lazy to ask, and maybe they never followed through with the shipment back to the States or Europe or Hong Kong. The point is, a lot of people don't get the full set when they buy the watch on vacation, and I've seen too many watches bought in vacation hotspots where watch tourism is common that are simply worth less because someone, either on the buying or the selling end, got lazy. Let's see what you guys are saying in the box. We got Ichimongo saying, I bought Invicta Armani Movado when I was 18 to 20, lots of regrets. Love Watches saying, dress watches are beautiful, but in today's society, impractical. Watch Out saying, all the more reason to wear dress watches with casual attire. I'm actually in favor of this if the watch is durable enough, especially if it's steel and it's got a real world durable movement. JLC dress watches are great for this. We have Calvin D saying, checking in from St. Louis, Missouri. Love to see the live stream and thank you for joining us. Watch by Design. Hey guys, DJ the Pug and I are running errands. Curtis, is that you? And then we've got Norm M saying, could also be gray market. Try getting service. That's a good point. You might regret that on vacation purchase. Patel Philippe saying, Tim, does everyone regret buying a 90s two-tone Tag Heuer Link? Not if they have a sense of humor. And then we have We Are Vinum saying, those are some scary scenarios. Never Kevin Up saying, vacation watch purchases come up with their own stories. Some don't get much wrist time, but the memories make them worth it. Regrets are sometimes just part of the collecting adventure. That's true. For every rule, there is an exception. Okay, here's a big source of regret, and I rarely see anyone saying they are glad they paid over retail. So a brand with integrity shouldn't allow this to happen at its own retailers, that is an authorized dealer, primary market. But it does happen. It's not so much an issue with Rolex or Patek if you're buying at an authorized dealer, but for example, Audemars Piguet, I don't like to beat up on them, but they sometimes set themselves up. They have advised their boutiques and their ADs that market pricing out of the boutique and out of the original retail location might be a thing in the future, which means if the watch is going for 20% over list on Chrono, you might pay that buying it new. That used to be one of the benefits of getting on a wait list and, well, waiting. You would ultimately trade time for money and get it at the list price. A dealer that does that right out of the case, original with warranty, I generally avoid that. Prices always come down in the long term on 99% of the watches ever made, and for the few for which it does not, you might even find an alternative that you like better. Or you might find that, frankly, the watch just wasn't what you'd hoped, and once the buzz passes, you've cooled off, and that can be a good thing. I'll also say this. More often, markups are the domain of the aftermarket dealer, the dealer that's either gray market or gets the watch from the person who bought it primary market and then resells it. Sometimes known as a flipper if it's done very quickly after original sale and while the watch is still very hot. So we've seen this happen. I mean, honestly, every aftermarket dealer has done it, so, mea culpa, being totally honest. But used Patek, AP Rolex, and even Vacheron Constantin overseas blue dials, you can find these things marked up compared to where they retail. And remember, that watch new is 25 grand. So for every one of these, there's a Chopard, a Girard-Perregaux, an Omega, or a Breguet that's just as cool, just as well made, just as beautiful, and possibly a fraction of the price. Breguet is one of those brands where you probably could walk into the dealer and get a nice hefty discount on the new retail sales price. I remember during the pandemic, to compare this to cars, which is often the case, when people were paying $10,000 over list price for Kia Tellurides, an entirely ordinary crossover SUV in the mid-market segment. I knew people who drove 3 states across and paid over list price by $10,000. $8,000 to get Kia Tellurides. And on G-Class AMG Mercedes, I saw market adjustments of 300 grand applied in the original dealer's showroom. So this can happen with cars, and it can happen with watches. I find people who buy at this level often have regrets. So unless you're gonna buy the watch and keep it forever, but paying over list rarely makes sense. And I'm going to emphasize, it only makes sense if you must be the first to have it and you plan to keep it forever. That protects you against any kind of regret because you're not going to worry about resale price, and presumably you are now married to this watch in a monogamous relationship that will never end. So that is paying over retail. I saw a lot of regrets back in 2013 and 14 when people were paying aftermarket prices 20 to 30% over list for an Omega Dark Side of the Moon or Gray Side of the Moon. Now you can get that watch for 30, 40, 45% off list if you shop around enough. Okay, so let's see what you guys are saying right here. Watches with Dennis, poor Breguet, but if you love dress watches, there are a lot of good deals, secondhand in particular, and I got to agree right there. In fact, one of the few yellow gold watches I really like is a 7027 Tradition with the full yellow gold gilded movement. And Abdul, if you're on the chat, I know you like that one too. We got Green Rush saying, I'm thinking about buying a white gold Pepsi Blue Dial Naked for $25,000. It's got little wear on it. It has been checked out for being stolen and authentic. Well, I'm assuming that means it checked out for not being stolen and being authentic. Hey, if you plan to keep it forever, not a problem. But if you ever think you might want to trade this or sell it, I advise you not buying it naked. Because if you hold in the long run on a watch like that, it will step up in value. But it won't do that as much. Because in Rolex world, there's a lot of identical watches on the market. And the best ones will always have good condition, full documentation, service records, and original box and papers. This isn't some vintage watch where you buy the best, or frankly, you buy any just by virtue of being available. Rolex buyers have a lot of choices for obvious reasons. Inventory is lush. Kevin Moore, Dr. Kevin Moore, checking in from Bloomington, Indiana. All right, well, let's check back with a few of yours right now on mine. But first, the huge watch. Okay. It feels wrong, it looks wrong, and it might have been bought sight unseen. I did all of these things when I bought my Jaeger-LeCoultre Master Compressor Extreme World Alarm Tides of Time. I said to myself, it's really like buying 2 or 3 watches, Tim. It's a world time, it's an alarm, it's got quick release lugs, it comes with 2 straps, it's a special edition, it's fully loomed, it's swimmably water resistant, and it's full of original innovations. This makes sense for you. And it was fun. As my first high luxury watch, I was chuffed when I got it. But I eventually realized that A, huge watches weren't my style, and B, it looked weird on my wrist because my wrist is small and this was like 46.4 millimeters. So I bought it without seeing it. I bought it at the beginning of my collection journey when I didn't know my tastes or my wrist size or my fit well. And perhaps I didn't have the critical eye I have now for aesthetics. If you think it looks wrong, it is. And once you make that decision, it's never going to look right again. And this is probably how you're going to feel, period. So, unlike a very small watch, a very large watch tends to look unsophisticated and might make you as a collector look a bit naive for getting in over your head or over the edge of your wrist. And that is the go, no go for me when the lugs are over the edge of the wrist. So I would say this is a mistake generally made by new watch collectors, me included. But if you're not in that group and you think you might like an oversized watch, but you're not sure, make sure if you're buying this over the internet or remotely that you get an unconditional right of return. Because it doesn't fit / I don't like it is a legitimate basis for a return. Viewer wrist shots number 2, Trent M. of Pensacola, Florida, hits the road in his Chrysler 300S Hemi with the Omega Aquaterra World Timer in steel. Jimmy Y. and his Panerai Submersible Bronzo PAM 1074 warm up for the game at Yankee Stadium. Darth Muppet of Vancouver captures his Stingray strapped Aaron bespoke Rolex Submariner, and the Muppet is wearing a Kermit. Kerry B takes his Breitling Super Ocean Chrono to the gardens of Versailles. the seat of power in Imperial France. We've got Gus G of Athens, Georgia, and his Seiko King Samurai SRPJ 93 overlooking Stella and Finley the dogs. Send your shots to Monday Mailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your watch on these box. We got Elder Pinto from Holland staying up late with us in continental Europe. We've got Andre J saying, didn't know my wrist size, made the same weird mistake. Don't worry, we've all been there. And Grandmaster Chime, enjoying the show, and a Padron Nicaraguan in sunny San Francisco. We also have James Blonde, Imperial France. Well, once upon a time, when the Sun King reigned, France was considered the preeminent power in Europe. And it's true, Napoleon, I don't believe he reigned from Versailles, but wasn't the Bourbon dynasty imperial? Didn't they have enough holdings on the continent? Didn't they project their power around the globe? I think so. So I'm going to declare that Imperial France, even if technically Imperial was under Napoleon after the immediate revolution. I still think the Bourbon dynasty deserves a shout out. What else is going on right here? Edward shouting out to pencil wrists. I'm in that club. Okay, what else is going on? Emil, he has to follow the rules. The watch must be more expensive than a Corvette. I'm not sure what that's a reference to, but watches people always regret. What lessons can we learn from their mistakes? Well, one lesson is never buy the not my first choice watch. So, the logic of settling for what's there or affordable almost always fails. So I liked the yellow gold Duomet, but I really craved the white gold model, which is what I ultimately bought after waiting for the white gold model to debut and then saving up the money to buy it. And that took all of 8 years, which is to say, well, I guess it took 4 years to save up and wait for it to debut, and then I owned it for another 4 years. I'm so happy I didn't buy the yellow gold model, because though I was in love with the mechanism, I don't love the yellow gold with the cream colored dial. The white gold was the watch for me. It was worth the wait, and it was worth paying a premium over yellow. Or if you want an overseas, but you settle for Laureato. Now the steel Laureato is $14,300. The overseas in steel is $25,000. It's understandable to think I could be over $10,000 to the good if I buy this Vacheron, or if I buy this GP. But if I've got my heart set on the Vacheron and I buy the GP, I guarantee you, short of a miracle, you will wind up buying both. And you will either wind up paying for both, or you will pay for both, trade the Laureato, lose some money on depreciation, and still be out more than if you just saved up and buy the Vacheron. So that is the way to go. If you don't buy the watch you really wanted, rest assured you're going to get it anyway, and you're going to learn the hard way. Always buy the one you want. And at the time you buy, I'll say this, you should be convinced you're buying the best watch available. Sometimes you do research and you find something you like more. That's not the same thing as buying your fallback option or your second or third choice. Example, once upon a time I was in love with the idea of the Rolex Submariner, and I didn't settle on my Omega Seamaster because ultimately it wasn't my first choice, or I couldn't afford the Rolex. It's true, I started my search with the Rolex, and I didn't have the money to buy it ultimately. But with the money I was able to marshal to buy my first, luxury grade watch, as I got all the graduation money in the world at my high school graduation, I had just enough for that Seamaster, but I'd done enough research to believe that the Seamaster was the better watch. And ultimately, I felt like I was coming out ahead because I bought the timepiece that had the better bracelet, the better clasp, the better price, the better legibility, the better design, in my opinion, and a heritage just as rich. So having done my research, I found something I liked more that just happened to be cheaper. But if I were still stemming on that Rolex and I bought the Omega, at some point during my first job, I would have gone out and spent a pile on the Rolex, and then I would have had both, and I would have spent unfortunate amounts of extra money that I could have used elsewhere in my young life or building out my watch collection to my satisfaction. So always buy the one you want, even if you have to save a little bit longer for it. Now, if the one you want is a Patek Philippe Grandmaster Chime, but you've only got Calatrava money, I can't help you there. But if there's some equivalence and an ability to step up your savings, then I would say buy the one you really want. Okay, Also, don't buy the cheapest example possible. This is always heartbreak. Guess what? There might be a Patek Philippe 3970J available for $70,000. If a great example of this watch should sell for somewhere around twice that, what are you giving up as part of the bargain? That is, what compromises are you making here? Well, the watch is probably naked without box and papers, and without the certificate of origin, that's something Patek won't reissue. A Patek watch is particularly kneecapped in the secondary market. You might be looking at the least desirable metal color, which is always yellow gold. You might be looking at a watch that is very complicated and unserviced, which means service costs lurk. And it might be polished to resemble a well-worn bar of hotel soap. All of which is to say, you might immediately hate yourself for making this $70,000 decision, even if at face value it is the brand and the model that you wanted. Or later on, when you finally have more resources in the bank, a great example might come up, but having spent 70 grand buying the bad one, you might not be able to put together 140 grand to buy the best one. And that's also the cost of settling. If you just buy the worst one available, you're not going to be happy with it, and a few months or years down the line, when your finances are better, you're still going to be in the hole for buying that ugly watch, and you won't be able to buy the really pristine version that comes up. So always save your money for a better opportunity, unless you just want to beat on the watch. And that's something that is a thing. Like, some people will buy the worst 3970 because they want to wear it every day without wearing it, without worrying about it. Mark Cho did that. I think it was a 1526, I want to say, and he bought one that was super polished and roachy, but he was happy with it because he didn't have to worry about marking it or denting it. He had a vintage Patek perpetual calendar and he could wear it every day. That's the only time. If you have the money to buy a vintage Patek Philippe beater like Mark does and then be happy with that decision, that's the one exception to this regret. Okay. So Emil is asking, Tim, how many Patek Philippe with Geneva seals do you have for sale? I'd say probably fewer than with the Patek Philippe seal. Michael's asking 3970J for 70,000. Ha. Yeah, but again, like I said, super roachy and compromised. Stuart saying, wow, almost 400 viewers. Let's keep that going. That's a good thing. That makes my week. And then Matt Kraft saying, yellow gold is my strong preference. Bargains come my way. That's true. It's like when I look at the closeout clothing and I'm a small despite being 6'1", I have my pick of the cycling clothes and the Target closeouts. What else is going on here? The vintage watch. A lot of people regret buying a vintage watch. Often smaller, more delicate, in worse condition, and less usable than a modern watch. Everyone loves the romance of the vintage watch, the same way they love the romance of the vintage car, until the little nylon timing nut inside the mechanical ignition system under your distributor breaks off and leaves you stranded on the Cross Bronx Expressway. Everyone loves the vintage car until it starts acting its age, and everyone loves the idea of the vintage watch until they realize how many compromises come with that watch. It often has a lot of the same handling restrictions of the ultra-delicate and frilly dress watch we already discussed. And what do you do when case and dial parts aren't available from a smaller brand? If you're looking at some old Pierce chronograph and it needs, I don't know, chronograph pushers and dial pieces, who do you go to for that? Those things were considered Volkschrono in their day. They were made to be disposed of, and now we're talking 60, 70 years later. The factory is not exactly going to be able to supply you with the parts because the factory doesn't exist. And these things weren't kept to be kept. They were kept to be broken and then discarded. So what do you do if you've got one of those mid-market or entry-level vintage watches? You probably hope you buy one intact and find a guy who can service it. Old watches can be a huge headache, and service can be a real pain and carry real risks. Maybe you send it back to the manufacturer, which still exists and is able to take a service request. But when it gets there, they replace your original tritium dial and hands because it had a scratch and you forgot to tell them not to, or they take your unpolished case and they run it up against a refinishing wheel, or they do something that compromises its original fabric or integrity. What good is a dive watch that can't dive? A lot of vintage sports watches are now so delicate you can't use them the way it was originally intended. And here's the other thing. A lot of times, this regret dovetails with the mistake people make of buying the cheapest one available. Do you really want a Big Crown Submariner? Sure, it's a Big Crown Sub, but it's got a replacement dial, a worn case, and the wrong bezel. Are you happy? I wouldn't be. And then non-experts get taken all the time, and there's a lot of fraud in the vintage space. And sometimes even those who are very experienced get had. Remember the John Mayer, Bob Marin lawsuits? It was all over the media. Everyone involved in those legal actions claimed to be an expert. Clearly somebody wasn't. I'm not an expert, but I know enough to avoid this space without extraordinary proof of serviceability, durability, condition, and authenticity. The vintage watch leads to all sorts of regrets, oftentimes because they're too delicate and people buy the worst example available. Now the shaped watch. Okay, this 40mm Vacheron Constantin Harmony Dual Time is rated as a 40, but it wears like a 42 to 43 and maybe even a little bit bigger. Even a 26mm Reverso, and that's mine right there, wears like a 39 to 40mm round watch, which you might not expect from something listed online as a 26. Look at this Grand Reverso calendar, 29.9mm on paper, but it's overhanging the edge of my wrist, and it's not just the span, which is 48.8mm, it's the shape. A shaped watch is almost always hostile to ergonomics and has to be considered to wear 2, 3, even 4 sizes larger than what's rated. This was really like a 43, 44mm round watch. The MB&F HM2 was the most awkward watch I've ever worn, despite an outwardly manageable sub 50mm lug-to-lug span that's comparable to a lot of full bracelet 40mm round Rolex models. It wore nothing like a Daytona. Try before you buy, or buy with the unconditional right to return. What else is going on here? Emil saying, Tim, make a stream about Pateks with Geneva Seal. You'll make me very happy. They don't make them anymore. I will do that for you, Emil. Okay, viewerist shots number 3. Bill L. of Charleston, South Carolina, captures his Tudor Black Bay chronograph steel and gold at the shore. Tarek H. visits the IWC Museum in Schaffhausen, Switzerland, and leaves a calling card in the guest book. Warren P. is training to become an airline pilot with his IWC Pilot's Watch chronograph AMG. Most appropriate, and best of luck. Stephen E. shares his charming Zodiac Super Seawolf ceramic compressor diver. Looking cool. My grandpa was a big fan of Zodiac Seawolves. Hannes L. wears his Tag Heuer Aqua Racer Pro 200 Solargraph while driving his Tesla Model 3. We have a quartz watch and a quartz car, if you will. Send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com to see your passion in this fashion. All right, watches people always regret. The hugely complicated watch. That is the Ulysse Nardin Moonstruck, which was so complicated it took UN years between the time this appeared at Basel and the time they actually sold it to customers. If it's that hard to engineer, imagine what it can be like to set. I set one of these once, and I can tell you, for all of his genius, even Ludwig Oxlin couldn't make this thing user-friendly. And it gets worse. I've seen the Trilogy of Time, and they're full-boxed, matching serial numbers, and the people who own them haven't set them since the 1980s or early 90s. And it's not always the expensive watch that fills this column. Sometimes it's merely the very dense electronic watch that has a lot of digital device-like setting idiosyncrasies and requires you to memorize a manual. It's like when you used to play that Falcon fighter simulator, you would have to dedicate months of your life to the Pentagon. You almost have to do that to set the X-33 Skywalker and the Z-33. The old X-33 wasn't quite that complicated, and the Breitling Aerospace isn't as bad, but these Skywalker X-33s are super dense. It's tough even for people who own them to stay current in all of the functions and how to use them. When I see this type of watch, they usually exhibit zero evidence of use, which is why we get some mint Celestial Complications and X-33s here at the 1916 company. But I often try to help when I can with instructional videos, particularly with the X-33s, Blancpain GMT Revise, and also the Breitling Aerospace. I would also say the watch you cannot try in person and cannot return for any reason but malfunction. This is the almost no condition return vendor. Never buy online or over distance without an unconditional right to return policy. That is, I didn't like it, I'm sending it back. and they should apply no more than the bare minimum of return shipping fees. There should be no exorbitant restocking fees if you buy a watch sight unseen. You should not have to make up an excuse like, oh, my wife just had a cancer diagnosis and we're going into hock to treat her, or I just had a heart attack and I can't pay for this watch. I've heard all of these excuses. The reality is all you need to say is, I didn't like the way it fit, and a good online vendor should take it back. If you don't buy from that guy, you're going to have regrets. I would say this: know your rights and dealer policies up front and get it in writing. Okay, we're going to end with a bonus round, an 11th and critical type of watch people regret. The watch you can barely afford. So this is how I approached the watch I could barely afford. I was once face to face with the Platinum Boutique Edition Jaeger-LeCoultre 15-day power reserve master minute repeater. And I was in love, but there were two things going on here. One, the watch that's too big. Two, the watch I could barely afford. I could swing the money, but I would be compromising my finances and my future ability to live and also buy other watches. Stress, worry, and strain, however you frame it, anxiety over money is a buzzkill. Never buy the watch you can barely afford for that reason alone. This should be fun. Lying awake at night, fretting over possible muggings, whether you can make the purchase, whether you can afford insurance on the watch, or service costs that might compromise your ability to finance the rest of your lifestyle. And something like this is going to be $5,000 to $6,000, maybe even $7,000 to service routinely. You really need to take that into account. It can affect relationships. It can compromise other aspects of your social, family, and professional life. And it can put you under financial strain that makes watch collecting a whole lot less fun than it should be. Dreams in this way can become nightmares, so it pays to know in advance what you're comfortable and able to spend. So Max Booster once told me that he spent virtually all of his money on a Speedmaster long ago, before he was with JLC, Harry Winston, or created MB&F. And that's the kind of romantic notion we often have about breaking the bank to acquire our hero watch. For him, life worked out. It doesn't always work that way. Reality is often more grim and less successful in the long run if someone right at the beginning of life spends literally all of his savings on one watch. Buy with cash, budget ahead of time, stay firm on your price range, and leave enough on any 5-plus-year-old watch that you can service it without being put into the financial red zone. The best watch purchase is the one that matches your ideal watch with total peace of mind on price. Okay, viewer wrist shots number 4, Chaitanya K and his Grand Seiko Snowflake salute Mount Rainier from Myrtle Falls. Pablo N and his 101-year-old father, God bless. They're at his lake house on holiday with the Mont Blanc Nicholas Riosec chronograph. Best to both of you. Daniel K. of New Jersey captures his Tudor Pelagos diver in its natural environment. Abdular from Germany forwards a cool full collection shot. Michael K., also of Germany, takes us home with his vintage Bulova Accutron Space View at the wheel of his Kia EV6 GT. That's the fast one. Send your wrist shots to MondayMailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your pieces on these pixels. At the1916company.com will also work. And if you are interested in a collector conversation with me in Hong Kong, you can also send that out to podcasts at the1916company.com to let me know if you're interested between the 22nd and the 24th of October. Time out, Tim out. Thanks to Nick and Kenny, and thanks for logging on.